Anarchy.
How is everybody doing? Welcome to another edition, another installment, if you will, of Anarchy in Space. Now, Eric doesn't know this, but I actually kind of redid the intro from the last episode, beefed it up a little bit, made it a little bit crazier. Really, I got it in there a couple times. BPM synced his Anarchy in Space with itself. Did a little echoey thing inside the echoes that are inside other echoes, and maybe it's going to be spacey enough for him this time.
It's like a Matryoshka doll of echoes.
See, he was tearing apart my intro, and so I tore apart his audio.
Nice.
So what is this fucking nonsense? What am I going to do with this? Anyways, so here's the thing. We're on episode number 3 of The Expanse. How are you feeling about this one? You still were you still getting into it at this point, or still kind of like, I don't know?
Yeah, for me, this episode was still kind of building up what was about to happen. But I think this one and the next one is kind of the turning point where it's now going to start getting into the beefier subjects on the show. Not so much exposition, but there was like, okay, well, we've established the world. Let's get into it. Let's find out how crazy everything's about to get.
I think this one, they really start establishing characters.
Yeah.
Because prior to this, they're all kind of this blank slate space cowboys, you know? And what the big thing, if I remember correctly, the big thing that happens in this episode is that we're dealing with the aftermath of Holden's message. This is what you hinted at in the last episode, where it becomes Remember the Alamo, where now it's Remember the Cant.
Yeah.
And so you're about to see a whole bunch of shit start happening on the world level, global level, universal level, because of that video that he sent. But we're also going to start seeing the characters kind of becoming actual three-dimensional beings. And the reason that happens is because when they're boarded, they're taken as prisoners by the Martian Navy.
Yes.
And over the course of this, they're going to start kind of pulling out little things about each other that even they didn't know. Which is really, to me, this is like where you actually start driving a real narrative. Like, literally, the first 2 episodes are all just world building. And, I'm a D&D kid, so I fucking love world building. I'm like, just give me books of world building. We don't even have to get to the story. Just tell me about the lands and the seas and all the peoples.
Yes, exactly.
It's not for everybody, I get that.
No, not usually.
So, what are some of the big things that we actually pull apart about the crew in this particular episode? Anything interesting that we had yet to figure out?
Yeah, I think with this one, it's we kind of get a little bit more introspective into Miller's character, since there's kind of riots are now starting to break out on board Ceres. We kind of speak to Holden's character a little bit by releasing all that audio blaming Mars for the destruction of the Canterbury. And then we get like a little side thing going on with Miller's partner, Havelock, getting swooped up in the attack and nearly getting stabbed to death himself. So I think everybody's just getting a little bit fleshed out a little bit more as the story is developing.
So if I remember correctly, this is the episode where on the Martian ship, they throw them all into confinement in their cells. And the big takeaways on like the people that are actually on the Canterbury. Is it not the Canterbury? Whatever the shuttle they were on from the Canterbury. I don't even think that had a name, did it?
I think it was called the Knight.
The Knight. See, I just keep in my head. I have the Rossi, so I'm waiting for them to get the Rossi. We're not there yet.
No, not there yet.
So one of the things that we find out is that they're not all treated the same when they get bored or when they're on this ship. When they first get out of confinement, they kind of put them all in a room, and they see that one of them has been taken care of a little bit better than the others. Yeah,
it's their pilot. It turns out he used to be in the Martian Navy himself.
Yes, which kind of lends to some of the things that we saw happen, some of his objections in the first episode, or was it probably the second episode? So some of the things that he did in the second episode that kind of make a little bit more sense now, where he doesn't have this perhaps distrust of Mars that everyone else does, because he was literally a soldier in its army for a long while.
Yeah, he's not quite as as reluctant to share information with them as the rest of the crew is. They're all trying to like play it close to the vest, but he's like, yeah, well, this happened and then this happened.
Now, what the thing that's going to be important that I want to point out about the character arcs is that each of these people that's on this ship, which is eventually going to be called the Rocinante, the Rossi. These three characters all have backgrounds that are very important to why they can do what they do in the show as things progress. You
Right.
have the pilot who is Martian. You have Holden, which I don't know that we've talked about it a whole ton, but he's an Earther. He was born on Earth and
Right.
now chooses to live in the outer belts. He has a really interesting story in that like he was actually raised by like 9 parents or something like that.
Yeah, it was something kind of freaky deaky that happened in a later episode where they're talking about his parentage, where he's got all of these different DNA strands in him.
Well, no, they bring it up. They do bring it up in this episode when he's being interrogated.
Yeah.
Because I think they try and ask him, well, which one is your mother, and like he refuses to cave to what they think of his, what is a family unit. As far as
Right.
he's concerned, he's got 9 parents, and they were all like genetic. All their DNA was combined to create him. Is the idea behind it. Get into a
Yeah.
little of the actual tech of the future world. So we have a Martian, we have an Earther, and then you add to that, we now also have, when we find out, Naomi. That's her name is, right?
Yes.
So Naomi is a belter, a native belter herself. But more than that, we find out she's actually, at some point in her past, was a member of the OPA, the Outer Planets Alliance, which
Right.
is, according to the other two, places, Earth and Mars, considered a terrorist organization. Now, you and I would probably think of them as freedom fighters. We may not necessarily agree with tactics, necessarily,
Yeah.
but the idea that they want freedom for themselves is something that should definitely be applauded. The whole idea that they're trying to do with all of this is they're trying to utilize we'll call it, for lack of nationalism. They want to create a nationalism in each of them to try and get them to turn on each other. And that's why this is all important for what's going to happen in here. It's also important later on because when you have all 3 of the particular organizations represented, you actually, let me say here, because you have all those people represented, it makes it easier for them to kind of not be treated as one part or another. They're not lapdogs of Earth. They're not lapdogs of Mars. They're not strictly rebels. Like, they're just kind of this weird neutral property. At least that's the way the story kind of treats them. So,
yeah, pretty much. It gets kind of funny. It's like they're almost like an afterthought, but they don't want to let them go too much, because they're the ones responsible for, was it ice mining? Whether that's how they get most of their fresh water.
Yeah,
because they melt down the ice and everything. But yeah, it's just kind of interesting. It's like, oh well, we don't really care about you, but we're not going to let you go. Type of thing. It's kind of fun.
Well, and you can see the derision. It's the whole ice mining thing is so important because it's analogous to a lot of things that happen between the first and the third world here in the U.S. In particular, like look how your cell phone batteries are made. Look where all those rare earth minerals are mined from.
Yeah, lithium and cobalt all tend to come from not very developed parts of the world. So
yeah, and it is not kind to the land that they're taken from.
Right. Afghanistan, anybody?
Go check out Free Market Screen Earth, where I talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
The point is that you have these people that feel as though they're being robbed of their resources because that ice comes from the belt. Like, that should be the belter peoples. They're the ones that do all the work. And yet, by some fluke of organization, the corporations on Earth and Luna and to a degree Mars just kind of get to say, no, we're taking it. It's ours. We call dibs on it.
Right.
This is going to become basically the entire premise of season 4 of the show when we eventually get that far. Like, that, it all comes to a head at like how entitled to property the Earth people and in particular corporations on Earth really feel. But in the first 3 seasons, it's definitely simmering in the background because that's the basic reason that you have such pissed off belters. because they feel as though they're being robbed and kind of being forced to do the legwork of the robbing for the people robbing them.
Definitely seems that way.
Which, from people of our political persuasion, like there's some real questions in there that we kind of have to grapple with. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
people, I'm pretty positive we're both capitalists, and I think people assume that we, as capitalists, we always go to bat for the corporation. But I know, in at least my perspective,
Yeah. Yes and no.
in my
Yeah.
perspective, corporations, certainly as they exist now, are entities of the state in and of themselves. They're not corporations as they would exist in any kind in a free market, as far as I'm concerned. So
Yeah, we can try to make that argument all day that cronyism is not capitalism. There's a reason why we use a separate word for it. And corporations, as they exist, I mean, they all get whatever power that they have because of government. And there's also a revolving door of those corporations sending people into government and then coming back out again and getting their jobs back, type of
who
thing.
had a really good episode recently talking specifically about like how libertarians have to deal with capitalism?
Might have been Jeff Deist.
No, it wasn't Jeff Dice. The
Wasn't Jeff Deist? Okay.
I want to say it was a Mance episode, and he had on. It was a great interview, Gary Chartier.
Yeah.
And in his specific take was like, look, you have to kind of. I think he's a little bit too hardline with his stance, but the idea that you have to make sure that you can't out of one fucking side of your mouth say, well, capitalism has brought us all this great stuff, and then out of the other side of your mouth claim that it isn't capitalism.
Yeah,
and I
that's
think
true.
specifically he's looking at people who say, oh, well, capitalism has brought 95% of the world out of poverty. And then out of the other one say, well, this isn't real capitalism. It's
Yeah.
not any more honest than, say, a lot of what the commies would say, like, oh, that's not communism. Communism's great. We just got to get real communism. There's definitely a degree to which we're kind of walking that line with ourselves. I think he's a little too hard on it because I do think, well, you're right. We're not where we should be, but we're still in a place where more is better.
Yeah, very true.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what's been going on with Miller? Dig into that a little bit.
Okay, so after Holden's broadcast triggered protest on series, now Miller's got his hand full with having to deal with an all-out riot on board there. And during that, he's kind of had to put his Julie Mao investigation on the back burner for the time being. And Miller's partner, Havelock, gets attacked. Is it Havelock who is an Earther, if I'm remembering correctly,
I
from
think
season
so.
1? Or the episode 1? Yeah. So they view him as their scapegoat to work out their frustration. So he gets stabbed almost to death. But we didn't find that out until the end of the episode, I think.
That's like isn't that like the last scene in the episode as they spike a fucking piece of rebar through him?
Yeah. And he's just kind of like left in an alleyway, to die. But it's...
If you're curious, by the way, folks, a really good improvised weapon, the way that they do it, essentially, they take a piece of metal, like a metal pipe, and pack it full of like an exploding fucking compound. And then, like, literally the pipe itself becomes the barrel, and the rebar is the bullet.
Yeah.
And so they fucking light it up and pop, shoots a fucking bar of rebar through a dude. I'm just saying, for those of you who are interested in Boogaloo, whatever.
Yeah, something
thing.
similar on Earth would be called a slam shotgun, where it's literally two pipes together, and the one pipe has an end cap with the nail in it, and you just slam the shotgun shell in the middle. You could probably check out a whole bunch of YouTube videos on how to make those, like less than $20 at a hardware store and access to a shotgun shell, and there you go. But yeah, he just kind of gets left for dead at the end of the episode, and meanwhile, we got some other stuff going on Earth.
Just to make a note specifically, why do and this is more than just rioting. What happens to him is very specifically a product of politics.
Yes.
Because the way that police are viewed, it's not that they're viewed as even police in any way. They are viewed as lapdogs of the companies that run there.
Right.
So that's the only way, outward way to attack the entities back on Mars, or sorry, back on the moon that are kind of driving what's going on.
Yeah, like I said, they're just make perfect scapegoats because they're just the other, as it were.
Well, honestly, I think what's really even more interesting about them when you think about it from like the political standpoint is that like we look at our government as kind of being this entity that almost exists in its own plane. Like it's here, but it's not really here. It's
Right.
real but not real. Well, for them, like their government, like the government, quote unquote, that they have is not here at all. Like it literally is an external force, much like say America as we try and run other nations. Like it's somewhere else dictating how things have to be.
Right.
So, and I think that is a very important thing to keep in mind. Like you're not even like your governments think back to the fucking Revolutionary War. Like literally, like it's the British. You're a whole fucking ocean away, and you're trying to tell me how to dictate like what we do out here.
Yeah, exactly. Even on a small scale, you might as well be on a different planet
Yeah.
because, even back then, it was a couple months to go across the Atlantic Ocean to go back to England. So, but not exactly quick travel.
Now, during this whole episode, is this the one where Miller is going around and he actually talks to the leader of the OPA or one of the bigwigs for the first time, or is that coming up still?
Yeah, that's coming up still.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in this one, like the riots turn violent, and then they kind of have to stop what they're doing with the Julie Mao investigation and handle it, and then they go back to Earth to catch up with Avasarala, doing a little bit of political intrigue, and then they come back to the Martian warship Doniger to catch back up with the Canterbury survivors.
So, what specifically is Avasarala dealing with? What's she got going on?
Well, she decides to test a theory that Mars was behind the attack, leaking to Mars information about the transfer of Martian stealth technology to the OPA. And they figure out real quick that the Mars was not responsible because they don't really know anything about that and nobody can prove anything. So now they're left with this. Who else is now wanting to start a war?
But how do the way that they actually do this? It's kind of interesting from like a political intrigue level that they essentially they spook them, and it's the chatter in the air, like the way in which that the different basically the way the government starts dealing with itself is how they would react differently if they knew something. They're acting just as fucking confused as Earth is. So it's like they would have played their hand differently, I guess, is the important thing. So she realizes, oh well, it couldn't have been them. So what's going on? Is it the Belters? Did the Belters have some kind of because the whole thing is based off of stealth technology that no one should have.
Right.
The only people that could have it are Mars, because the Mars have they've advanced their science to where they have really good stealth technology. But now apparently somebody else has it, and they don't believe that the Belters could. So process of elimination, it would be the people that would have that technology.
Right.
We're going to find out that it's neither of those parties. It's going to be another entity entirely, but we're not quite there
yet. Yeah, this episode still is building a lot going forward. So once we get into the next episode and the episode after that, it's kind of where the climax starts to happen a little bit.
Well, once again, keeping with the premise that we're kind of learning about the cast first to really starting to learn about these characters. Now, we got to see that Avasarala had no problem being a quote-unquote diplomat and torturing the shit out of that Belter to get information she wanted.
Right.
But we're now left in a position where she, in order to get the response that she wants out of Mars to see if she can get the information, she spooks them by literally throwing one of her personal friends under the bus.
Yeah. She's not exactly a nice lady.
Yeah, like do they have the second conversation in this at the end of this episode, or is that next episode with him? Because her friend loses a fucking ton in this deal.
Yeah, I think that might have been the next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that when it comes up, because essentially she asks her friend to start asking questions, and that's officially what spooks Mars, because they can see that Mars starts asking around to see why he's asking that question, and
Right.
She knows that if they just kind of didn't do anything about it, they knew about it. But because they're asking questions, it means they must not.
Yeah.
Very complicated, intriguey kind of stuff. That's probably my least favorite part about the series is when it gets too deep into the overt politics like that. It doesn't spend a whole lot of time. I like when it's asking questions that are really analogous to, how we should handle and comport ourselves as people and nations and things like that.
Yeah.
That one gets a little too in the weeds of like the espionage part of it, which I think is the least interesting shit in the world. God, I hate like those Bourne movies. They're fucking terrible.
Yeah, except for the action bits. Like the action bits in those movies are pretty cool. No,
I don't even like action.
no.
No, I have a very particular taste in movies, and that's not it.
Yeah, the Bourne ones. There's a lot of backstory and everything that doesn't get revealed to you all at once, and yeah, it's a little bit more political intrigue. The books are like that too.
Have you actually read the books? I take it then.
I read the first one, the Robert Ludlum. God, that book is old too, and I think it came out in the 70s or 80s, something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm so pumped, and I'm so pumped and excited for like the next season of this show to drop because, especially with how terrible the Star Trek shit has been. I'm sorry, Jake. It's terrible.
Yeah, Star Trek is the original series was campy. The Next Generation, there was a lot of the political stuff going on as well, and then Deep Space Nine was just a one depression episode after another.
I mean, my big issue with all of that is that like it got rid of the core of what the fucking series is about. Like the important thing about Star Trek is that we live in a universe, like the central tenet is we live in a universe where basically all want and need has been gotten rid of.
Yeah, post scarcity.
And there literally is a benevolent central government.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's a stupid fucking premise necessarily, but that is the premise and you accept it. Like that's how things work. So to get rid of that premise like they have in all of the new J.J. Abrams Trek, you've gotten rid of the most important part of that series and like the thing that mattered most. That was literally the entire concept that he had to begin with. And moreover, it just kind of makes it standard fucking sci-fi at that point.
Yeah.
Like if maybe if they called the show something else, I'd be more okay with it. I probably wouldn't because there's so much SJW politics in there too. But like literally, you're undermining the thing that made your thing unique. So if you get rid of, you're just gonna be normal sci-fi, whatever. There's far better normal sci-fi out there that I can watch. Too many fucking lens flares.
Yeah, that's true. J.J. Abrams is notorious for that. Didn't really do that too much in the new Star Wars movies. He kind of kept the lens flare to a minimum.
Well, I mean, they'll talk a lot of game on the fact that that's put it this way: the fandom menace made itself known, and he called him out specifically, like so it was on his fucking mind what he was doing when he made that movie.
Yeah,
the most recent one, like he was trying to kind of like you can tell that he was trying to keep himself in check because he like he couldn't deal with like it was going to be a real failure if it didn't happen.
Yeah,
because the SJW types aren't going to see movies.
Yeah. Pretty much. They just assume everything's going to be horrible. So they'll wait for somebody to give them a hot take.
They're not going to buy comics. They're not going to do any of the things that they're forcing you to change for them.
Right.
But, yeah, it's a little frustrating. But I definitely, you could tell that the fan service, as they call it, was the big takeaway in the new ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I think we covered like all the stuff that was really, really important in this episode. We're still doing a lot of the background and build up. Not a whole lot's happening. You get the shows are almost more about building that there's a lot of things going on that we don't know about at this point still.
Right.
So.
And even even with the crew on the Donager, coming back to the show and everything, one of the ending scenes is now we have an unidentified ship that's flying towards it, and it's ignoring all requests to divert or identify itself.
Yeah.
So it kind of leaves on a cliffhanger.
So somebody exists out there that's willing to take on a government. Right. Is what we're assuming.
Yeah.
Who is it? Is it Earth? Is it a rebel OPA faction?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Don't know.
So,
and that's what makes it kind of interesting because now you're like, well, all right, well, who's coming in on a Martian vessel, which is kind of known as being this, uber badass out there in the at least on the inner planets.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, Mars is a military society.
Yeah,
So that's where they pour, much like any other military society. Like it is a well-oiled machine with all of the nicest trinkets to work with.
yeah,
But let's also not forget that when they first, like, this whole thing started because it was the ship that they were on was attacked,
right.
believably, by a Martian ship too. Like, the original signal was Martian. So now we're kind of is it possible that there's like a rebel faction of the Martian Navy? We don't know.
Could be. Military coups have happened before.
So right on. Well, any last words you want to get in there? You want to get in any of those technicals you like to bring up?
Yeah. So this episode was titled "Remember the Cant," directed by Jeff Woolnaugh. Came out December 22nd, 2015. And then another kind of like a ratings drop. So this one got in the eyes of 676,000 people out there. Previous episode was in the 800,000s, which is kind of normal for any sci-fi show. It usually starts off pretty big and then dwindles off where they find like a happy medium.
Yeah.
And so this episode and the few episodes after that are right in that, mid 600,000 range. So
and they definitely, I know with sci-fi shows, they definitely know.
Yeah.
That's why it got 3 seasons, even with ratings like that,
Yeah.
Because it's sci-fi and they know it's going to take a minute for it to catch on if anyone's going to get into it. And like I said, eventually, like, as far as sci-fi was concerned, they never got out of it what they wanted to get out of it.
Yeah, that's true. They wanted their next Battlestar Galactica hit. So, but
Now,
yeah.
But hey, Netflix, or not Netflix, Amazon bought it, so lucky for us.
Yes, exactly.
And it does seem as though it's doing much better on Amazon, by the way.
Yeah, they without too much promotion on it, even if you have Prime and everything, they don't kind of beat you over the head with it. They're just like, oh yeah, by the way, we have this Space Odyssey that you might want to check out, and then people do.
Well, and I know like a lot of the reason it's on there in the first place is there were people that watched it on Sci-Fi that legitimately campaigned anyone to pick this fucking show up. And I guess it's one of those instances where, kind of much like they listen to the SJWs, they listen to the people on fucking Twitter and wouldn't shut up about it. And hey, they got it trending. So, that makes it something to pay attention to. Yeah,
similar thing happened with the show Lucifer. It was on Fox, and Fox was going to cancel it. And then it was like, oh, Netflix, like, well, we can make it a Netflix original. Not a problem.
Well, I mean, American Dad was canceled and was picked up again by different companies. Like, that happens fairly frequently.
Yeah.
I can't remember where that show ended up. Did they go to Comedy Central or something for a while?
Went to TBS.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, TBS and TNT, because of Adult Swim, because that's all owned by Ted Turner. They had like rebroadcast rights, which is pretty much where Family Guy lived after it got canceled back in the day. It was they just played all the reruns on Adult Swim. So when fans got it back up there in, like, what was it, 2006, 2007, went back to Fox. But they tried the spin-off shows, the American Dad and then the Cleveland Show. So
honestly, I prefer both of those to Family Guy. I'm not a Family Guy person. My little brother loves it, and like, I'll watch it occasionally, but I don't necessarily see what everyone thinks of it. So
I do it for a little bit of the jokes that take too long.
Well, for me, like, all of my favorite, like, my favorite characters out of all those, like, I love Steve.
Yeah.
And I love Roger.
Yeah. Roger the alien that kind of sounds like Paul Lynde.
Yeah. They make the show for me.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed when they stopped following around the golden turd.
It was such a big part of that show for so long.
I know.
All right, boss. Well, you have yourself a good one. All you folks out there, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoy.
Yeah, come back next time. We'll do episode 3.
No, this is episode 3. We're on episode 4, bro.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I know. As of the recording of this, we haven't released number 2 yet.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, this editing just takes forever. The longer I talk, the more harder it gets.
That's very true. So let's keep talking.
Oh, no, I gotta get going for another interview here.
Yep. All right, man. Well, take it easy.
Just take it easy, Eric.